Hello and welcome to the Self-Storage Made Simple podcast. I'm your host, as always, Thaddeus Campbell. Really excited tonight, going in a direction that I haven't gone very often on the podcast, which is deep down the road of technology. Super excited to be joined by the Chief Revenue Officer of an exciting company, a company called Live Switch, which is doing some amazing things. They've just really recent entrant into the self-storage market. James Hatfield, I want to thank you for coming and joining me, and really excited to go down this rabbit hole with you.
Oh, I love it. Let's go. Alice in Wonderland. Let's go down the rabbit hole.
A guy who's well-read also. Well, I always start this off, and this is going to be an interesting one with you because you guys have not been in this space for very long, but I always ask the same question to get started, which is, and I ask it as a preface because self-storage is such a niche. It's such, and not only a niche, but a very unique asset class in terms of the people that populate it. So I want to ask you, how did you find yourself as a guy who's been in technology for a while, all of a sudden in this wonderful asset class we call self-storage?
Right. Nobody ever finds their way into self-storage. Like no one's born like, I'll tell you what I'm going to be when I grow up.
Yeah, exactly.
Never. No, what happens is you have a good friend who tells a friend who gets you involved, and then all of a sudden you're, in it to win it, so to speak. So my good friend happens to be John Lindsay. I know a few of your listeners will know him. If you don't, he sits on the board for Self Storage Association, and he said, I need to come in and disrupt the industry. So I'm going to blame John, and he wouldn't mind me doing that. So I'm blaming John for pulling us in to self-storage.
I'm going to tell you, John was on the podcast very recently, which is cool. For those of you watching, you can go and watch his episode. What a guy to have as a close friend, because he is just an absolute A, ball of energy, but B, one of the most upbeat and positive people that you'd ever want to know. What was it that he told you about self-storage that he thought you could come in and be a disruptive? And when he says disruptive, I know he meant that in a positive way because that's the way he's wired. What did he think you could bring to the table for the storage industry to really kind of push this asset class forward?
I think it's probably what I told him first. And then he was like, okay, we need to make sure you come in. So a little bit of our story. I don't tell all of it at this, but I'll tell you how I got in. So I started working with the chief of police of Washington, D.C. to reinvent the 911 phone call. Okay. Anything in the government takes forever. So you guys will see this later. You won't see it today, but for Tomorrowland, Futureland, yes, I'm a tech nerd. But the idea is everyone now has this thing called a smartphone in their pocket. And, bless your heart, if you'd only still have a flip phone, you're still a hero. But most of us now have this infrastructure in our pocket. And this can be used to help emergency medical, fire, and safety, as well as police, help with situations. So in the future, you get a 911 phone call. That's done over telephony. Telephony is a very old technology, which is why your phone, the worst feature is the phone itself, right, Dad?
Yeah.
But you have one point of connection with the authority. The next thing that'll happen is you'll get a text and you'll click and allow it, and you can point, and now you'll have voice through telephony, but you'll have video through our technology that will go right to the police car, fire truck, or emergency medical, and it's called situational awareness when they're driving into the situation. And so because of disrupting that, John heard that and was like, okay, you need to come and do something in self-storage, because I am looking for more and more homes for this technology, and we'll walk through that. But that's how we got involved.
You have a pretty significant track record with the success of introducing your, technology advancements into different companies. Talk a little bit about where you guys have been previous to coming into storage.
Yeah, you got to rewind the clock about 14 years ago. Okay. 14 years ago, our co-founder, he's a computer scientist, helped to pioneer a technology called WebRTC. And if you're like, what's that? I didn't know what that was either. Okay. So you're in the same boat, but it's called Web Real-Time Communication. Okay. The only other companies that we dabbled in it before even Google. So Google uses this. We use this, and only a few other companies in the world will use this. But this allows us to do things that even the largest companies on the planet can't handle. Live video is extremely difficult. And so we started there, and we've done things. And I bet your users, our listeners, excuse me, I want to say users, your listeners have touched our stuff before, and they had no idea it was us. We are like the Intel inside. So if you watched this All-Star game basketball back in the day, when COVID, and you saw all the digital fans like people screaming from their couch.
Yep.
You might have seen us on World Wrestling. We did 100 episodes with WWE. Nowadays, like we just did the Super Bowl this year. If you today go to an MLB ballpark for baseball, scan a QR code, and they put you on the Jumbotron, you are on Live Switch. And we power some of the largest platforms in the world. Our largest customer is Adobe. So they come knocking on when Adobe comes knocking on your door because they can't figure it out, you've got something special.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. I mean, Adobe is something that I use daily almost. And to think that the people behind that ability to manipulate documents and do those things can't figure something out, and you guys are coming in. I'll be quite honest, it's one of the reasons that I brought you onto the podcast. We had talked a week ago and didn't know you guys, what you did, but your track record of what you showed, it just speaks for itself with the level of technology. So I guess my next question is going to be a little deeper. I had Mike Burnham on the podcast a couple months ago, and Mike is the president of Storage Mart, the largest privately held company in self-storage. And he had talked about how, technology was really slow to come into storage. And there's been some massive things happening lately. We talk in the industry right now about a lot going on with web marketing rates and what we call ECRIs, existing customer rent increases, as a big strategy in the marketplace. And it took a while to take hold. So I'm setting this background as you're coming into this, what really is a metal box, industry. How does Live Switch help introduce this technology in a way that's going to be an asset? Ultimately, it's got to be an asset to our customers, right? If it doesn't do something to increase the value to our customer, it doesn't increase the revenue and nobody buys it. So how does Live Switch help self-storage operators increase the value to their customers?
Okay, I think it's going to help in a number of different ways. Okay, and there's a great shift. Okay, and it's not going to be for everybody, right? Remote management, contactless, whatever synonym we want to use is not going to be for everybody, but everybody should consider it, okay, for a number of different reasons, right? One of those reasons is that it's going to help your bottom line. If you can give the same great customer experience with wonderful people talking to your tenants and customers, and you can do it for less, that's probably going to make you a little more interested as an owner or operator of a self-storage facility. As an example, I've talked to a number of these different CEOs before we even put the product out, we went and we did our research and we talked to the people that have been pioneering this. Okay, we've been watching what's going on in the industry. So I'll tell you what a COO recently of a top 100 told me and why they use Live Switch. Okay. So imagine you've got even 10 facilities. You can have 60, 100, 200. I know but maybe you have 5, 10 facilities. You don't have many facilities. That's fine. That's great. It's still a lot of work, right? So if you're going to staff each of those facilities, let's say you have 10 facilities, that's 10 staff that you need to hire for. And we all know that having that staff contributes or doesn't contribute to your bottom line, right? And so you're looking to get just enough of the right person. Maybe you're willing to pay a little bit more for a higher skilled individual, right? It can cost you a good pretty penny to make sure that, hey, now my facility manager also has to be excellent in customer service. So you're telling me the guy that needs to, maintain the place also needs to greet everybody with a smile. That's kind of a big ask. Right. So what some of the facilities have figured out is look, I'm going to try to do a hub and spoke model with my facility managers. I'm not going to put a customer success person at every location. I'm going to consolidate that. So rather than having, 8, 10 people with customer success, I'm going to go down to 4 or 5. But I'm going to pay them a little more so that they're going to like that. They're going to be able to remotely help those customers. And I'm going to pour a little extra money into training them with excellence with that customer. Now, I don't know if everyone is familiar with this fast food restaurant around the country, Chick-fil-A, compared to Burger King. And no knock on Burger King or whatever, but if you go through Chick-fil-A drive-through and you go through Burger King, what's the difference? Food's still coming out the other end, right? Different kinds of food, but there's a level of customer experience and talking to people where you're like, something's a little different here, right? They have invested in customer experience, in training. So what we see our facility managers, operators, and owners doing is let me really invest in those 5 or 6 people that are going to be the face of my facilities, because people are coming to you after a divorce, a death, or a move, or a life event. So we hear with this customer experience professionals, they're more like, hey, like I'm dealing with someone in a big life event and I want to have my best face forward. And the best way I can do that is through things like virtual assistants and things like that. So the customer experience is one, and then the bottom line is two.
It's interesting. You're starting to speak my language when you talk net operating income. Typically in one of these facilities, your staff is either your second or third biggest expense over the course of a year, right? Usually property tax is number one. And then your staff, depending on what area of the country, maybe your insurance is more expensive than your staff. But it's a major part of your net operating expenses, which obviously really affects your bottom line. This is like an age-old question, and I say age-old, it's not that long, because the idea of completely remote management is still relatively new in this industry, but it's something that's ongoing a lot. There's those people that are like, they're entrenched. They're like, nope, you need somebody on the ground. You need somebody to see. We actually, Safe Storage USA, who I work for and operate this podcast, we have 2 facilities, and they're fully, and in fact, all 6 facilities we've owned, fully remotely managed. So we're very familiar with that and comfortable with it. I guess my question is, how do you convince those people that are entrenched in that idea of I need boots on the ground? What's the way you get them to embrace technology as a way? And again, you're saying it's hub and spoke. You're not going to eliminate all the customer facing people, but how do you get them to maybe go from 10, 12 customer service people at a facility down to 3 or 4?
It's going to be through seeing is believing. Okay. You're going to have seeing is believing, right? So if you've done something for 30 years, you don't believe usually it can be done in another way. That's how you do it. Like you don't really want to change, really. I mean, when it comes down to it, it's okay. Like there's some things in my life I don't want to change, right? I like certain things, but when you're open to at least seeing it, maybe seeing a close, the great thing about self-storage is how networked everybody is. Everybody knows everybody. Everybody calls you friend, hopefully, right? But like you need to go and see, go touch, taste, see, and smell that it can be done. And don't just talk to the operators, talk to the tenants. Ask the tenants what they think. Because at the end of the day, that's who pays the bills, right? Now, if you can give them, they're like, no, I have no problem. Like I found this, that, then all this can be taught. Nothing is new. This is teachable. This isn't as difficult as one might think. But for the ones that are going to be slower to change, they're just going to be slower to change, And so it's that wave of adoption, right? And sometimes some folks won't ever change, and that's okay. That's okay. We're not going to change everybody, but we'll tip the scale on a few.
I think that's the wonder of business, right? Is that there are some people who are slow to adopt change, and it's what opens up the door for people who maybe are late to the game to really come in and disrupt and be effective, which I love, which is exciting for me. It's one of the reasons I'm one of those people who's an early adopter, right? If there's new technology, I don't wait for the second generation. I go buy the first generation, and if it stinks, it stinks. But I like being on that forefront, which is why this is so exciting for me. The question I want to ask you, we talked a little bit, and listen, if you don't know the difference in customer experience between Chick-fil-A and Burger King, I'm sorry for you. Quite frankly, I sort of wonder these days how Burger King is still alive, to be honest, given how big of a difference that customer experience is, right? And maybe not everyone's me. I'm willing to pay the 20, 30% extra that Chick-fil-A costs because it is such a better experience. How does limiting the number of front-facing people and having that technology, how does that help the customer experience in your vision in a self-storage facility?
Let's go back to Burger King and Chick-fil-A. You ever gotten an order from someone who you can tell doesn't want to be there?
Oh, it's the worst. At McDonald's every time, literally every time.
And I bet you might be able to think of a facility manager who doesn't want to be a customer success person.
Yeah.
Who does it because they have to, not because they want to.
Right.
Right. You have to have people in the chairs that want and know that the people that are coming in just went through a death, just went through a divorce. It's not just about putting stuff and storing stuff, right? It's about people, and this is why the people that do excellent customer service, their customer success reps get Christmas presents from tenants because they listened. They took another 20 minutes. That has to be taught, and it has to be something that's in your culture, right? If you look, Coach Wooden, like one of the best basketball coaches ever.
Coach Wooden, yep, John Wooden.
Yep, would say, like, how do you get your players so motivated? He's like, I only recruit motivated players.
Right.
So how do I get my culture to change to be customer focused? Well, only hire people that are customer focused.
Right.
How do you know? You will know. Do an interview. Do they give a hoot? Welcome to Burger King. What's your order, man?
Yeah.
Is that your self-storage right now?
In many instances, that's what you're getting when you go.
Yeah, it is. And look, that's just how it's by design, because you can't level up unless you're really going to spend it. There's a side of the scale. Again, I'm meeting with all the CEOs, big and small. I'll meet them all. There's some that have turned their facilities into, they're gorgeous. They have the drive-through car wash. You walk in the lobby, it's like immaculate. It's beautiful. They're paying, and they're unapologetically the most expensive place. And they'll tell you, like, unapologetically. Now, there's the bottom shelf where it's like, look, I'm just trying to, there ain't nobody there. We're not going to do anything remote. Like, I don't even put gates up, just got old school locks. Here's a key. And it's the full gamut, right? Yeah. And there's a place for everybody. But I want folks to understand that, like, if you reduce staff and pay people a little more who value customer success and don't give rusty hammers to your carpenters, give them the right tools, you're going to be surprised at how much your tenants and future customers and prospects will, and when your customer success people follow up, how much money is lost from not following up, how much is lost from the phone not being answered. This stuff pays for itself very quickly. We are unapologetically affordable, and it's easy. We're not even, if it's change management, like maybe you've just used hard to use software. I'm sorry for you, right? Our stuff takes 10 minutes to learn by design. Because I know, change management's hard for your team, and there's no software for your customer to download. Nothing, zero. If they can tap a text, they're on. So it has to work for the least tech savvy people. Okay, so it's got to be by design. It's got to be thoughtfully engineered. Oh, well, I use FaceTime or I use Zoom. I'm like, no, you don't. No, you don't. Like, ask your customer how they like that.
Oh, listen, how many times have I set up a Zoom call with somebody who's used Zoom and it still turns into a disaster, right? Trying to get logged in. So understand that completely. It has to be easy. It has to be as easy as humanly possible, right? Yep. I love where you went, and it brought me back to somewhere where I wanted to go with this interview anyway. We're gonna dive into an area that you and I share some similar passion in, but I grew up, most of my adult life was a martial arts instructor. And it's something that my teacher / he was also my business mentor. He just stayed on this with us so much. You want to be the most expensive school in your area, but you want to be worth every penny of the extra cost that you're charging somebody else, right? And we were 30, 40% more expensive than any other martial arts school in our area, but we had twice as many students as any other in any other school in our area. And it's something interesting that you talked about, that we also trained way more because we were so successful. It was a full-time job. I didn't have to go do my day job and then walk over to my martial arts school at night. We spent all day training to know how to do that. So I love that idea of, hey, look, we're going to use technology to really hone in on the right people to have the conversation. But that's not enough. Then we got to train them to really be the right person to speak to their customer.
That's right. That's right. I used to run a martial arts academy as well. And my job was to teach people. And of course, I wanted to teach them excellently. But here's the difference why I could retain it. And I remember like it was yesterday. I had father-son Father was thanking me. He's like, James, the reason we keep coming here and we pay more is because we love you.
Yeah.
It wasn't about the martial arts, right? It was the exercise, the time with the kid, but you buy from people you love. I'm sure you've never heard that before, right? That's like old school 101. People buy from people they like, and we are in the people business in self-storage or martial arts. You touch people.
Literally a part of my life mission that I've written out for myself is to create relationships, because I believe wholeheartedly that relationship building is where it's at. You have to be able to provide something of value to somebody at the end of the day, of course, but if you don't have a relationship with them, you are going to be transactional, and they're going to go find somebody else who can give them that resource at a lower price. And my dad and I talk about this all the time. My dad's been in business for many years. That becomes a race to the bottom, right? It becomes a race to who's going to get to zero profit first, right? And we don't want to be that. I want to have that relationship where you are coming and I'd never really thought about that in the storage space before, which is very cool, that this is a place where people are going through something. And in many instances, one big sector of our business that you didn't mention is small business owners, people that are storing their business materials. And that's an emotional thing, right? Like your business is on the line there. Or as you said, divorce or death, or they're in that, if you've ever moved before, which I'm sure you have, the stress of that time and being able to adequately respond to that person's needs in that moment. It is not a skill that everybody possesses.
No, it has to be trained and hired for and part of your culture and direction. And then you have to put the tools in place, because it's more expensive to be able to. So how do you do that? You can actually do that at a cheaper cost. And the way you can do it is through using remote-based technology. Otherwise, you're going to have to go the other direction. You're going to have the car wash. It's going to have to be immaculate. You're going to have to pay more. And welcome to being a nonprofit.
Yeah, which, ultimately helps nobody, because if you're a nonprofit, your facility's closed and that person has no place to store their stuff.
Right.
And my mind is racing so much now, right? Because like we talk about New York City, and I mentioned Storage Mart earlier, right? They own Manhattan Mini Storage, which is by far the highest rates of any place in the country, like triple the high places. And I'm thinking like your cost of a employee in New York versus like Indianapolis, Indiana. And what's really ironic about that is I go to New York City quite frequently. The level of service that you get in New York City is nowhere near. I was just in St. Louis. I was just in El Paso, right? The level of interaction and positive customer interaction, you may be able to find somebody in Idaho to service that customer in New York at a significantly less cost.
Oh, 100%. And let's think beyond the United States of America, by the way. All right. So I've stood up offices in Sao Paulo, Brazil, Philippines, India. We've had great success. And people are like, oh, well, what about the language barrier? No, there are people that are trained in customer success, and you can get 3 for 1, right? I think the first great wave of self-storage, again, I'll be wrong. Like, I'm not a fortune teller here, right? But here's my guess of how this might play out. Play 1, you're going to have people that stay 30 years is how I've been doing it. They're never going to change. Fine. Yeah. Second stage, you're going to have people start dabbling in this and start to hire remote staff or change their current staff to remote people. They're going to change their title as their first. They're not going to get rid of their people. They're going to keep their people and change their title to virtual, allow them to work from home a little bit, have a call center. The next wave is getting into third-party managers to do it for them, or hiring in lower cost states or provinces if you're going to stay in North America. And then the final wave is when people see that they can have 24/7 coverage and you can leverage global resources and give incredible service from anybody in the globe. And the great news about remote assistance, I can connect people in real time with high clarity from the Philippines to St. Louis or New York or wherever. It's having the right mix of people with the head of what are we about? Culture, customer service, and you can train that wherever, and it's good for your bottom line, and it's good for customer experience. It's not for everybody, though. I still will say, as much as I want everybody to do this, I understand it's not going to be for everybody.
And that's okay. You're going to be able to have an essentially a live beta test to say, hey, does this work or doesn't it work? Because we know that there's going to be those hard-headed people who are super resistant to that change. One of the interesting things that I would talk about right now that I think is going to help this transition is that we're facing a challenging time in the industry, especially for some developers that, got into this late, maybe in 19, 20, 21, underwrote some projects in the middle of COVID where things were going like gangbusters. And we've seen some really, big rate reductions in markets across the country. There might be some people who adopt this, not necessarily because they wanted to, but because the need to reduce that net operating expense is just paramount.
Absolutely. I mean, everyone's watching their bottom line. This is good for the bottom line as well as for the customer experience. It's one of those things that we always recommend: the crawl, the walk, and the run. Don't try to go run. Let's just crawl. Crawl, we have something very simple. It's text to connect. You can teach anyone on your team to do it. Give that video. Pick a site, pick two staff, and do it at one spot. Lower your risk by just dipping your toe in the water. Now, I've got plenty of folks that go right to the run. They want it all, and they're ready. They've got change management down. They got tech down. Not a problem. Like, we can run as well. Yeah. But for those that are maybe like, start off in the crawl phase, and that's a great place to be too.
It just occurred to me that I was having a problem. I just moved into this house a few months ago, and I was having a problem getting my internet working, and did a live with Verizon just like that. Called the customer service. They sent me a link. They hooked into my phone through a live thing and were able to take me to my router box and get everything fixed. It was such an awesome experience, and literally was just clicking a button on my phone. And I didn't have to wait, 3 days for them to set up an appointment and then wait in a 6-hour window for somebody to show up. It literally got done while I was on the phone. And quite frankly, the person who was talking me through it on the phone was a million times more personable than the typical person that comes to your house. So I have a personal experience with this kind of technology very recently that was super positive. I couldn't be more excited for what you're doing. I'm a tech geek. As I said, I'm not quite as techy a geek as you are. I haven't ever been involved in a tech company, but as I said, a person who's an early adopter. I know this is something I'm going to talk to my partners about and have a conversation, because it just makes perfect sense, especially for us with remote facilities already. We do the same thing. We have a hub, right? We have somebody who answers the phone. They're overseas already, so it's something that we'll talk about from their side of it. I want other people that might be as intrigued by this as I am, that want to get a hold of James Hatfield and talk about LiveSwitch. What's the best way for them to get a hold of you?
Go to liveswitch.com and book a demo, or go to LinkedIn and look up James Hatfield, and you will find me and connect with me there. I'm easy to get, but liveswitch.com will come right to me. I'll make sure you're taken care of with my sales team or with me directly. I'm happy to work with anybody.
Man, I'm so excited, and you got me pumped up through the last half hour. I really appreciate it. So glad we connected. I'm just going to say that you have a sales guy who reached out to me on LinkedIn, and I'm usually super resistant. But speaking of great training, he interacted with me in such a professional way and set up the meeting for us to get together. Really, really glad that he did, and says a lot about you guys and the way you've established your company and the training you're doing within the company. Looking forward to seeing how you guys disrupt self-storage over the next couple of years, and look forward to continuing the relationship. Anybody that wants to reach James, we've got the crawl going with the website, with his LinkedIn. Look forward to hearing your feedback once you have a demo with him. As always, I'm Thaddeus Campbell. This is Self-Storage Made Simple. Appreciate you guys tuning in. If you got something of value here, please hit the like button. Please subscribe to the channel. You'll get updates all the time. James, look forward to talking again soon.
Thank you.